Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is David Nixon. I'm your MC here in this room today, where we're talking about free-to-play and social games, passion of mine. By way of introduction for our next speaker, I think it was 3 years ago here in Hamburg that I first met Aki JARVINEN from Digital Chocolate. I had invited him. First of all, he was the only person that I'd ever invited on stage to talk about game design who had PhD after his name, which actually concerned me a little bit. I was like, PhD, really? This is going to be boring. But he laid out at the time, one of the most concise and interesting presentations as far as making game design in social games understandable, especially the differences between social game design and traditional game design. And I've been chasing him pretty much ever since to come back and speak for me at one of my tracks again. But he's in such high demand after that in the whole world that I can't seem to coordinate with him. But Aki is here today to talk about innovation in social game design, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. So take it away.
All right. Thanks, David, for the kind introduction. So I'm basically going to talk about three things today. I'm going to talk about innovation, I'm going to talk about execution, and daring to innovate. And as a kind of a case study, I'll be touching upon latest game from our studio, Racetrack Rivals, which is trying to push the envelope with social games, especially on platforms like Facebook. So when I speak about social games, I'm basically meaning games that are either online, in the browser, or mobile. And what they do is that they are basically multiplayer, but they leverage especially the player's social network ties for different purposes for the gameplay. And as we know nowadays, most of these games are going with the free-to-play business model. And as a company, we've had quite a lot of success on that front, so both on mobile and in the browser, Facebook especially. So games like Zombie Lane, Army Attack, Millionaire City, and also recently Crazy Penguin Wars. But we have had also our failures. So I want to ask first, who here has worked with a failed product? Hands up. Okay, and so the rest of you are living in denial. So what happened with us was that now that I'm talking about innovation, innovation is in relation to conventions. So if you are purely conventional, you don't really innovate, right? And so we had this game on Facebook and actually launched on Google Plus back in the day that it seemed feasible to do that. We basically thought that we had checked all the check marks on the conventions of a social game, and what we then tried to do was to take a city builder, all the conventions, and then really up the production values, and then take the Western theme, which is sort of mass market, very popular, and we thought that, yeah, this will be a big hit. But what happened really was that we arrived late at the market. We arrived at the time, like less than a year ago, when obviously the Facebook crowd especially had grown kind of like exhausted to the city building formula. So it didn't fly, it was an absolute catastrophe, but still it was considered a failure. And then as a team, as a studio, and also personally, that sort of struck me to take a look at should we innovate a bit more? And therefore, there's a couple of books from Clayton Christensen, which are basically seminal books on innovation. And even if they are speaking basically about the sort of brick and mortar business and retail business, there are some relevant observations there. However, as we are working in the creative industries, we are working with entertainment products, it is a bit hard at times to adapt their findings into our business. But I will touch upon a couple of those. But I was mentioning convention before, and obviously, I mean, convention is, the way that things are done, especially within a particle area. So who here wants to be entirely conventional? Okay, so there's nobody from Zynga in the room. So who wants to innovate? Yeah, woo! So innovation is cool. So when we want to innovate, we basically want to, engage into action and process of innovating and creating something new, idea, product, whatever. And what that means is that we need to think about how far do we want to then take the innovation so that it's feasible and so that the risks are sort of manageable. And so then we come to the concept of incremental innovation, which is more or less what I'm talking about here today. And what these guys like Clayton Christensen say that the main point about incremental innovation is that it's building on existing knowledge and resources you have. So for instance, the talent and knowledge that your people in your teams, in your studio or company have. So in that sense, it's a sort of easier feat to engage with incremental innovation rather than step into something what is called as radical innovation. But there has been quite a lot of incremental innovation going on in the social game space, like during the last year, and I'll just give you a couple of examples just straight out of the hat. So for instance, Draw Something, huge success. The whole sort of notion of taking this kind of like, you could say, a board game-like concept of trying to guess what the other guy draws is not really that innovative in itself, but here I want to raise for the first time the importance of execution. So the way these guys executed originally at OMG Pop, this game, the way that you see how the other person is drawing the picture is that detail that really distinguishes this game from the crowd. And that's why I've put it here in the list of incremental innovation. Another game, Baseball Heroes, has been pretty successful on Facebook. Uses a lot of conventions having to do with Facebook games, but still incrementally innovates, for instance, in the way that they actually have designed the gameplay for the baseball matches itself. And obviously, baseball is a huge sport, so it's not really going out there in any radical way, but still executed also very well. Then the Spry Fox guys, obviously doing pretty amazing stuff. For instance, with Triple Town, incrementally innovating the match 3 genre. And if you haven't seen what they've done now with the Leap Day game just out, you should really check because there's lots of interesting stuff going on there. So, a few examples of incremental innovation during the past year in social games. But then the question becomes, is incremental innovation enough for you, and to whom is it enough? And one important point from this literature is that when innovations are incremental, the established leading firms in an industry are likely to reinforce their dominance. So what that means is that as we defined incremental innovation as something that builds on the existing knowledge and resources. So if you have lots of knowledge, lots of resources, it's easier to step into the incremental innovation side of things and continue to dominate. But if you are an entrant to the market, so a new player, it actually might be easier to make the entry with more radical innovation, because what that means is that you are not building on an existing knowledge or, for instance, technology, which is a resource of its own. And the classic example here, of course, is the iPhone launch. So Apple did not have to unlearn how to do mobile devices. They could step with a sort of a radical innovation to the market, and companies like Nokia are struggling to sort of unlearn, to keep up with the pace. And what that means in terms of social games, I'll come back to that in a minute. But now, once again, I want to raise the importance of execution. So even if you would have incrementally innovative or radically innovative concept on paper, it doesn't really obviously count if you are not able to execute. So as it says here, telling a man to go to hell and making him are two different things. And therefore, actually being able to execute even on incremental innovation, it's not trivial. So what I'm basically now spending the last half of the talk is to take a look at how we've tried to, at Digital Chocolate, for instance, raising the increment so that with the current resources, with the current knowledge, with the people we have, the talent, how could we stretch them and push them to the extreme in a sense, but still keep, still keep some conventions in place, but still, try to dare to go where no social game has gone before. So I'm basically now giving you the 5 steps of how we've tried to do it, and I dare you to try to do the same. So with Racetrack Rivals, even if we are now at Casual Connect, and after this talk I probably shouldn't attend because we are daring to go core and competitive. So, and the reasoning here is basically kind of like a company strategy one, as well as that we are trying to create products where our customers' lifetime value would be higher. And if you execute core competitive games well, through that competitive edge, we believe that high lifetime value will follow. So we are creating games where people own each other and they can taunt them and so on and so forth. These are guys that I've owned in Racetrack Rivals, by the way. Then this is slightly controversial and even contrarian, because the word on the streets and there in the hallways is that, of course, mobile and tablets are the thing that is growing the most. But I would just like to make the point that there is still a viable business out there on the browser, even on Facebook, for instance, because when I hear about, for instance, remarks about Facebook virality, for instance, yesterday here, they mostly seem to relate to what Facebook virality was like a year ago. And if you put your mind into what, and really take a look what Facebook has done with the so-called Open Graph, it's a much more subtle form of virality. And if you really invest in sort of more adapting that to your game's purposes, you can do wonders. So we actually invested quite a lot into it. And we are seeing thousands of new users through virality every day. So you can still trust the browser as well. But you also can try to dare to trust the skill factor and not shy away from it in the sort of, being scared that it will drive players away. So we are creating a game where basically people might lose a race with, 1800ths of a second as in this screenshot. And the way we believe that if the gameplay itself in the racing in this example is fun, it's the motivation for that guy who lost is to rectify the situation. So there's this addictive replay loop, and it's pretty much the same as if you play like a game like Angry Birds, and you believe that if I can just swipe my finger with 1 degree, upwards, I will, clear the level. So it will work for long-term retention, but what it probably means is that it will drive some people away. So the day one retention might be worse, but it will pay off in the future. Then the oldest trick in the book of creativity is combining things. And now what I'm saying is that dare to combine things across domains. So for instance, in terms of games, across platforms. So we took a reference for one of our competition modes from a AAA console title like SSX Snowboarding. And we have basically repurposed it for our asynchronous competitions of a certain duration. And that we see works well for Facebook in terms of retention, because players come back in a much same way as they come back to collect their crops. They come back to see how they did in the competition, how they finished. So dare to take advantage of conventions across genres. And this guy, well, he had a thing to say about invention and innovation. So he basically, one of his famous quotes is, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And so what I'm daring you to do is to think 12 months ahead, because that's something, for instance, that we failed to do with the Gangs of Boomtown, the Western game I showed earlier. We kind of like were in the illusion that the things would remain the same, and with the production times that games like this nowadays have, from something like 6 to 9 to even 12 months, you have to think ahead and try to then position yourself as a leader rather than a follower. And it's not still trivial. I mean, you can try to do all these things, and even with us now, the game has gone just out, the Racetrack Rivals, and jury is still out. We are trying to grow the game, and whether we have executed optimally is still up for questioning. But still, what we basically, just to summarize what we tried to do, is that we took a 3D arcade racer to the browser with Flash, no plugins. We married it with the time-based virtual goods economy and monetization mechanics from many strategy games, for instance. We went deliberately, obviously because of the theme, for a strictly male audience, more or less. And all these synthesis we decided to launch on a couple of social networks. So that is the kind of synthesis of daring to do different things. And as said, the jury is still out, but so that you get a little bit better idea of what we actually did, I'll just show you a short promo video. So that's Racetrack Rivals out on Facebook. Go play it. So what I dare you to try, and what we tried to do, is we dared to go where pretty much no social game, at least on Facebook, has gone before, and it's not easy. Like to be honest, the early results are mixed. We are seeing some very promising signals. We are seeing some less promising signals from the data and how the game is panning out. But still, I'm really proud that we dared to do it. It takes a leap of faith. It's not a walk in the park. But then again, I like to think that that's who we are as a studio. We try to, go for the home run and strike at the stars and hope to land at the moon, at least. And yeah, that's what I dare you guys to do as well in your own special way. And that's it for me. Go play the game.
Thank you, Aki. Thank you very much. So just a quick question to start it off. Is Racetrack Rivals, is that synchronous or asynchronous? Because it looks synchronous when in the video.
Yes, but that's actually, you could say that's one small innovation, is that it is actually asynchronous. So we are using the age-old ghost mechanic familiar from racing games. So when you go and race, you are basically racing against the lap times of people who have raced before you on that track. And that's how we try to sort of appropriate that mechanic into the asynchronous nature of many Facebook games. And that also we dealt with a whole host of technical issues having to do with syncs and lags with that solution.
Other questions for Aki?
The first question, I have a bribe for the first question. Really cool Racetrack Rivals scarf.
Hello. So how do you monetize this game? Where do users pay at which moments of game?
Yeah. So we have this pretty, I didn't bring it up, but one way actually we still try to innovate as well is that we have a pretty ambitious system of parts for the cars. So that's the heart of our virtual goods. So you buy new parts for the cars, and our reference there is really like Diablo. So we create unique parts for every player. We don't have zillions of art assets, but the parts have attributes for how your car performs, and therefore we might have a part that looks similar, you and me, but the attributes might be different. And then when you level up, you do research, you are able to get better parts, and the research is also a monetization sink. And then there's also a sort of a limiting factor you get for your playing is that your car takes damage while you race, and then you have to repair it to be able to race again, and that's another one of our monetization mechanics.
Can I deliver that for you?
Yes. Right.
Other questions? Even though they don't come with a scarf.
Yeah, I only have one.
I tell you, this has been a show of no questions. I had no idea that Europeans were this shy. Unless there's a scarf
There's
involved,
one here.
apparently.
David, there's one here.
So yeah, my question is, what other technical implications did you have when implementing shadow multiplayer? What sort of considerations in that sense? Did it sort of fit to the genre?
Well, basically, the hard decision we already covered that we had to make in the very early stages, that do we want to go for a real-time, live multiplayer thing, and at the time we were considering Facebook as a platform, and so it was also a sort of risk management decision, and we had this idea of the sort of asynchronous ghost races. So it just, in terms of risk management, and also it always relates to the capabilities and talent that you have in the team. And I think that also sort of touches back on what I said, that building on existing knowledge, we didn't really have people in the team who have experience on working on real-time multiplayer. So it's like a lot of small factors that made this decision to go for asynchronous feasible. But I think, as was evident from David's remark, looking at the video, it gives the illusion of being real time. And what we're hearing from the players is that there might be this first impression that isn't this real time, but then there's also this kind of like upside that when it isn't, you can sort of really focus on just on the lap time, and that gives actually a slightly more casual nature to the racing.
Hi, it's Boštjan. Where do you see patents challenging innovation? You said before that you are using Ghosts, which is a patent by Atari. So how did you guys solve it, for example?
Well, I mean, we don't even call them ghosts, and I can't see. There's like tons of ghosts only in the sense that they're not practically ghosts. It's only sort of a common term in the racing game genre to call that sort of storing, the race of a previous player, and even sort of racing against yourself in a way that doesn't infringe, on that kind of a patent at all.
One last question?
Yep.
Yep. Who said yep?
I did.
Oh, you did. All right. Thank you very much, Aki.
All right. Thanks.